Michael walked through the deserted streets, the cold night wrapping around his thoughts. For months, he had been dedicating time and energy to discovering more about his past. Finally, he had found an answer. The name of his biological mother, Mary Ann Sullivan. But despite this discovery, the emptiness still haunted him. He wondered if this was really the answer he was searching for, or just another piece of an incomplete puzzle. His mind was restless, and his heavy steps revealed his emotional exhaustion. As he walked, something unusual caught his attention. Across the street, a pregnant young woman was sitting on the curb, her face partially hidden by her hands. Her silent sobbing seemed to blend with the distant sounds of the city, but it was impossible for Michael to ignore the scene. Something about her deeply touched him. Maybe it was the fact that she was alone, in evident distress, or the feeling that he had once been in similar situations of despair. Without thinking twice, he crossed the street. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice trying to be gentle but filled with genuine concern. The young woman slowly lifted her face, her tearful eyes reflecting the streetlights. She seemed surprised by his approach, but her expression soon shifted to confusion and fear. I don't know what to do," she murmured, her voice trembling. Michael could see she was disoriented and likely without direction. There was something in her gaze that made him hesitate. Perhaps it was the depth of her sadness, the fear of trusting a stranger, or even the exhaustion overtaking her body. "I can help you," Michael offered, feeling an unexpected inner strength for the situation. He knew she needed more than just words. "Is there somewhere you can go? Someone I can call?" She shook her head no, her eyes lost. "No, I'm alone." It was at that moment that Michael made a decision. He couldn't leave her there at the mercy of fate. "Then let me help you," he said, offering his hand. "Don't worry, we'll figure it out." As Michael helped Clara to her feet, he couldn't help but feel an inexplicable connection to her situation. It was as if, somehow, he understood the despair and loneliness she carried. Maybe it came from the fact that he himself had faced a life marked by absence and uncertainty. Since he was a child, Michael had always known he was adopted, but the lack of information about his biological family had turned him into someone reserved and introspective. In recent months, however, everything changed. A former employee of the orphanage where he had been left as a baby had finally revealed his biological mother's name, Mary Ann Sullivan. It was a simple, common name, but it carried immense weight for him. Since learning this information, Michael hadn't been able to stop thinking about what more he could discover. He spent sleepless nights diving into old records and conversations with people who might give him answers, but so far the name hadn't led to any significant discoveries. And that was exactly what kept him in a constant state of emptiness. Knowing his mother's name should have filled the hole he carried, but it didn't. In fact, it only brought more questions. Who was she? Why had she abandoned him? Did he have siblings? The only thing Michael knew for certain was that he had never felt complete. As they walked slowly down the streets toward Michael's car, he couldn't help but reflect on his own story. He knew how hard it was to trust others, especially when everything in his life seemed temporary. But even with those painful memories, he felt an inexplicable need to help Clara, even without knowing who she really was. She too seemed forgotten by the world, just like him. Maybe that's what drove him to keep going. "It's going to be okay," he said softly, as if his words could ease the tension Clara carried. But in truth, he was also trying to calm himself. He didn't know what the future held, but at that moment, Michael felt he was exactly where he needed to be. Michael drove silently through the dimly lit streets with Clara by his side, still wrapped in an uncomfortable silence. He could feel the weight of the tension in the air, as if both were avoiding the real issues troubling them. Clara stared out the window, her hands resting protectively over her belly. She seemed lost in thought, but Michael knew her dilemma went beyond what he could see. "Do you need medical help?" Michael asked suddenly, breaking the silence with the concern growing in his chest. Clara hesitated, seeming to wrestle with the answer before finally shaking her head. "I'm fine. Or at least I'm trying to be," she responded in a fragile voice. It was clear she was avoiding something, perhaps a fear or a secret she wasn't ready to share. Michael knew there was more at stake than just the present situation. The simple fact that she was there, alone and pregnant, already indicated that things were not okay. He had faced moral dilemmas and internal conflicts throughout his life. Growing up without a family, he had learned early to rely only on himself, but he also knew what it was like to be in a position of vulnerability and in need of help. And now, with Clara by his side, he found himself at the center of a dilemma. Should he stay involved? How far could he go to help her? At the same time, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something much bigger connected him to this unknown young woman. "Don't you have anyone to help you? No friends or relatives?" he asked, trying to understand the situation better. Clara remained silent for a moment before finally sighing. "No, I'm alone," she said, with evident sadness in her voice. "I can't go back home. It's not safe. For me or the baby." Those words echoed in Michael's mind. What did she mean by not safe? Was she running from something or someone? He began to realize that what seemed like a simple act of kindness might be much more complicated. It was clear Clara carried a heavy burden, and now somehow he was involved in it too. I can take you to a hospital, at least for tonight. Tomorrow we can figure out what to do," Michael offered, trying to find an immediate solution. He knew he couldn't solve all her problems, but he felt the least he could do was ensure she and the baby were safe, at least for the night. Clara hesitated, but eventually agreed. "Thank you. Really. I don't know what I would do without your help." With that, Michael sped toward the nearest hospital, still unaware of how much that night would completely change his life. As they drove toward the hospital, Clara began to reveal fragmented bits of information that left Michael even more worried. "I can't go back. He'll find me," she said, her voice barely audible. Those few words made Michael's heart race. He didn't need to ask who he was. It was clear that Clara was running from someone dangerous, someone who posed a real threat to both her and the baby. Michael felt a lump in his throat. He had faced challenges before, but nothing that involved physical danger. Now, without realizing it, he found himself caught in the middle of a dangerous and uncertain situation. Every word Clara said made him question how far he was willing to go to protect her. But one thing was certain: she needed help, and he couldn't turn his back on that. The shadow of a possible abuser, an invisible figure, loomed over them like an imminent threat. Meanwhile, Clara grew more and more tense. Her eyes showed fear, and the physical discomfort of her pregnancy seemed to worsen with the stress of the situation. Michael knew that getting to the hospital was an urgent necessity, but he also began to wonder if the hospital was really the safest place for her. What if he was nearby, waiting for the right moment to strike? Who's after you?" Michael finally asked, breaking the tense silence. Clara hesitated before responding, her voice filled with fear. "It's my baby's father. He's dangerous. I ran as soon as I realized my life was at risk." This revelation made the situation seem even darker. Now, beyond the responsibility of helping her, Michael felt the weight of something bigger, protecting Clara and the baby from this man who could appear at any moment. He didn't know exactly what to expect, but the presence of a real threat changed the atmosphere completely. Arriving at the hospital, Michael felt a momentary sense of relief. At least here, Clara could receive the medical care she needed. But at the same time, he couldn't let his guard down. The hospital was a public place, and the fear that the dangerous man might find her there kept him on edge. They entered through the reception area, and Michael quickly went to the front desk to start the process of admitting Clara. He glanced at the young woman beside him, still scared but calmer now, knowing that she was, at least temporarily, safe. What Michael didn't know was that his life was about to change in an unimaginable way, as he would soon encounter a surprising detail on Clara's intake form. Michael approached the reception desk, anxious to ensure that Clara received medical attention as quickly as possible. He could already see the discomfort growing on her face as the tension of the night seemed to be taking its toll. The hospital was busy, and time felt like it was dragging with each passing minute. Michael took the documents Clara had handed him and began filling out the admission form. However, as he wrote down Clara's name and filled in the fields with her personal information, something unexpected caught his attention. In the section marked Mother's Name, he froze when he read what was written, Marianne Sullivan. It was the same name he had recently discovered during his long and arduous search for his biological mother. The shock hit him like a punch to the chest. He stopped breathing for a moment, unable to process what was in front of him. Michael reviewed the name several times, making sure he wasn't making some kind of mistake. But there was no error. There, on the paper, Clara's mother's name was exactly the same as his own biological mother's. He was paralyzed, feeling his body tremble slightly with the revelation. Michael's mind began racing in multiple directions, trying to connect pieces he never imagined would be so clearly placed before him. Could it be possible? Clara, the pregnant woman he had found in such a vulnerable situation, could she be his sister? As he tried to absorb this possibility, the world around him seemed to disappear. Michael felt the ground slipping away beneath his feet, the hospital noise becoming a distant echo. He had spent so many years without answers, without clues about his biological family, and now, by an almost unbelievable coincidence, this woman, with whom he had felt an inexplicable connection from the first moment, could be the person he had been searching for his entire life. Taking a deep breath, Michael turned his attention to Clara. She was sitting, still writhing in pain as the nurses began preparing her for admission. He knew he needed confirmation, but he also knew this wasn't the right moment. Clara was about to give birth, and that was the main focus. However, he felt the urgency to confront this revelation, to ask Clara about her mother, to try to understand what this meant for both of them. I'll finish filling out the form and be right back, Michael said, his voice hesitant as he tried to remain calm. He handed the papers to the receptionist and slowly walked back to Clara, his heart racing. Every step felt heavy with uncertainty. Michael knelt beside her, looking directly into her eyes, and then, with as much care as possible, he asked, Clara, I need to ask you something. Your mother's name. Is it really Marianne Sullivan? Clara looked at him, confused and still gasping from the pain. Yes, that's her name. Why? Michael felt his throat go dry. He took a deep breath before speaking again. I think your mother is the same mother I've been searching for my entire life. I think we're siblings. Clara's expression changed instantly, her confusion turning into shock. She was speechless, trying to process what Michael had just said. The revelation hung between them, bringing to the surface a flood of emotions and questions neither of them was prepared to answer. Clara remained still, staring at Michael as if his words made no sense. The revelation was overwhelming, something she could never have predicted amidst the chaos of her life. Siblings? She murmured, almost in a whisper. The words felt unreal on her lips. How could this be true? She had spent her entire life unaware that she had a family, just as Michael had. Emotions began to overflow. Clara, already fragile due to the pregnancy and her circumstances, felt a mix of shock, confusion, and deep sadness. At the same time, a new hope began to stir within her. What if Michael was right? What if, amidst all the hardships she had faced, there was a part of her family that had always been searching for her? Michael, still trying to process everything, saw the tears starting to stream down Clara's face. He moved closer and held her hand firmly, feeling that despite the uncertainty, they shared something far greater than either of them could comprehend at that moment. The emptiness Michael had carried for so long, the constant feeling that something was missing, began to fade. He had finally found his sister. And not only that, he had found her in one of the most vulnerable moments of her life, just when she needed help the most. I've spent years trying to find answers about our mother, Michael said, his voice trembling. I knew she existed, that she left me at the orphanage, but I never knew why. I never knew about you. He squeezed Clara's hand a little tighter. And now here we are. Clara could barely speak. The labor pains were becoming more intense, but the discovery that she had a brother who had been searching for her all his life brought a new strength. I didn't know about you either, she said, panting. I only knew my mother left me, and I never saw her again. The connection between them was palpable, and even though their stories were only beginning to intertwine, there was a mutual understanding of what it all meant. Clara was about to give birth, and that baby symbolized more than just a new beginning for her. It also symbolized the start of a new family for both of them. The nurses began preparing Clara for the delivery room, and Michael, still stunned by everything that had happened, was ushered to accompany her. Beside his sister, he held her hand, silently promising himself that he would never leave Clara or her child alone again. Hours later, the cry of a newborn echoed through the hospital, bringing with it a wave of emotions neither of them could contain. Clara, exhausted, held the baby in her arms, with Michael by her side, overwhelmed as he watched the moment unfold. The cycle was complete. The man who had spent his entire life searching for a part of himself that seemed lost had finally found more than he ever imagined. They looked at each other, and without the need for words, they knew that from now on, they would face the future together. The loneliness that both had felt for so long was replaced by the strength of their family bond, by the support they would give each other moving forward. As the quiet of the hospital settled around them once again, Michael and Clara contemplated the future that lay ahead. Both had faced their individual battles, the search for answers, the fear of loneliness, the flight from danger. But what neither of them could have imagined was that in the most unpredictable moment of their lives, fate would unite them in such an unexpected way. Michael looked at Clara, at the newborn baby in her arms, and reflected on the power of family ties, even when those ties remain hidden for so long. Sometimes life takes us down painful paths, full of uncertainties and losses. However, amidst those challenges, there are unexpected opportunities for redemption and healing. The message that became clear to both was that, no matter how hard we try to control the course of our lives, destiny may have much bigger plans. The simple act of reaching out to someone in need can not only change that person's life, but also bring forth the answers and love we seek for ourselves. In the end, the greatest gift Michael and Clara received wasn't just their reunion, but the chance to start anew, together, as a family.